I will never forget the sound of Mrs. Adanna's cries that day. It wasn't just loud. It was the kind of cry that shakes your soul. Mrs. Adanna was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and her beauty was a blessing and a curse. She married Chief Nnanna, a man 30 years older than her. He wasn't strong or wealthy like some men, but he was kind and cared for her in a way that made me believe love could be simple. But not everyone thought their union was fair. Chief Nnanna's elder brother, Uncle Obieze, had always hated Mrs. Adanna. Maybe it was jealousy, or maybe it was because she gave Chief Nnanna what Uncle Obieze lacked: a family and a home full of love. Uncle Obieze, being the first son, believed he had the power to control everyone in the family. He had no respect for Mrs. Adanna or her children. Trouble began one afternoon when Uncle Obieze called a family meeting. I remember standing at the edge of the crowd, curious but nervous. Uncle Obieze, with a smoke that made my stomach turn, announced that someone had accused Mrs. Adanna of sleeping with other men in the village. He said the land was now cursed because of her actions, and according to tradition, she needed to cleanse it. Mrs. Adanna was stunned. "It's not true," she cried, holding her youngest child close to her chest. Her children, young but brave, stood beside her. "Our mother will never do such a thing," they shouted. But Uncle Obieze wasn't alone. A few of the men in the kindred, men who had secretly wanted Mrs. Adanna for themselves, sided with him. They nodded in agreement, their voices full of false righteousness. The Umuada, women from our kindred who were married to other villages, heard about the meeting and came to investigate. These women were known for their fairness and strength, and they didn't tolerate injustice. They questioned everyone, even me, because I had been around the family a lot. I told them the truth. I had never seen or heard anything that suggested that Mrs. Adanna was unfaithful. After their investigation, the Umuada declared that Mrs. Adanna was innocent. There is no proof against her. Their leader said firmly, "This is a lie." But Uncle Obieze wasn't ready to let go. When Chief Nnanna fell sick and died a few months later, Uncle Obieze and his supporters refused to help with the burial unless Mrs. Adanna performed the cleansing ritual. She pleaded again, saying she had done nothing wrong. The Omuada stood by her side, repeating that she was innocent. The argument dragged on, delaying the burial. It was shameful to see a man's family treating his widow this way. But the Omuada didn't give up. They brought elders from neighboring villages to settle the matter. Finally, Uncle Obieze was sanctioned. He was stripped of his privileges as the first son, and the elders made it clear that Mrs. Adanna would not perform the ritual. Not long after that, Uncle Obieze fell seriously sick. People whispered that his sickness was punishment for his wickedness. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that Mrs. Adanna and her children finally found some peace. She buried her husband with dignity, and the family that once tried to destroy her was forced to face the truth. They couldn't break her. Even now, when I think of Mrs. Adanna, I see her as a symbol of strength. She taught me that no matter how dark things get, standing by the truth will always bring light. And Uncle Obieze, his sickness was a reminder that evil doesn't go unpunished.